Welcome to Manager Tools. Decisions, not choices. Part 1. This cast answers these questions. How is a choice not a decision? How can I turn my decisions into actions? What do I do when I make a decision? Well, if you want answers to these questions and more, keep listening. Here we go.
In 2 weeks' time, Manager Tools will be in Charlotte, North Carolina with our Effective Manager and Effective Communicator conferences. Always a favorite stop along the way. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Register today at manager-tools.com/training to join us in Charlotte.
I talk to a lot of managers out there, and a kind of recurring theme is they want to become executives because then they can make the decision. They can make the choice, right? They want to choose because, of course, to be better at choosing than their boss. That's the underlying.
They're smarter.
Thing.
Yeah. Well, be careful what you wish for.
You're saying it's not that easy?
Yeah, because executives, individual contributors make choices and sometimes decisions. Managers start making decisions, but Drucker tells us that the executive's specific job is decisions, and decisions are much more than choices, right?
Well, if they're going to be useful.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, think about it. How many times have you made a decision where you thought of, I've just made a decision, and everybody agreed, but your decision never really gets implemented?
Too many times. Unfortunately.
I mean, think about it. How many times have your clear ideas, the choices you've made, not been implemented? How many times have things not gotten done? It's because people don't realize this. In the context of an organization, choices alone are not decisions. And decisions take a bunch more work, is really what it boils down to. And we act as if, we talk as if that hey, I have decision-making authority, but really it's more decision-making responsibility. And we describe what we do as managers or executives as, well, I make decisions and there's planning and there's implementation. Actually, the planning and the implementation is all rolled up in the decision.
Yeah, I like the distinction you said between authority and responsibility, because authority just suggests you just do it and it's done, right? And responsibility suggests,
you have to do it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So our outline, and I should have said, stop. This is an executive tools cast. Choices are not decisions. Decisions require communication. They require assignments of responsibility. They require deadlines. They require reporting. And I'm not saying that's all. That's just the big buckets.
Yeah, that's the 101. That's the basics.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so I think we need to get a little bit into choices are not decisions, because I'm sure some people are having a hard time wrapping their head around that distinction.
Yeah, look, I didn't know it. I didn't understand. The choosing is not the work, although it's not trivial. It's the responsibility is the work, everything around it.
Well, and making the choice is not easy. And because sometimes it's such hard work that once the choice has been made, it seems like, I'm done finally, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the hard work has just begun.
Yeah. And look, the classic example of this is somebody looking up at the executive in their organization and wishing for that person's executive decision-making authority. But when we do that, we prove that we know not what they do, nor what executives wrestle with. The junior professional who wants to make his or her own decisions really just is saying, I want to be able to freely choose, right? But in an organization, for anything an executive does to have value, it can't be a thought, it can't be a belief, it can't be an idea, it can't be a statement. It has to be implemented and create value for the organization. And so it's not just the choice. It's not just A versus B that gives executives their power, their reach, their purview, or the other side of their reach and purview. It's the ability to implement those choices. That's to make them decisions, and that's what matters. And people just think that the decision is A versus B. And in organizational parlance, in Drucker's world, but organizations here, well, we made a decision. Yeah, and you realize there's way more than just, okay, we chose investing in product A versus product B. And choosing, at least the way most people think about it, is easy, but deciding is much harder. And this is what's funny. Okay, I got a couple of emails this week about micromanagement, because I mentioned in Things I Think that I'm consistently amazed. And of course, at this point in our careers, Mike, being surprised, continually surprised, being surprised every once in a while is not a fault. Being continually surprised is a fault. Yeah. And so I continue to be surprised, to my own chagrin, that the idea that a manager doing manager things is micromanagement, it's just still rolls my eyes. So I mentioned a story of someone doing something completely managerial. On a scale of 1 to 10, it would have been a 4, and people scream bloody murder that I'm being micromanaged. But this is what's interesting about decisions. Okay, in the decision world, in organization land, in decision city, the distinction between choosing and deciding is that deciding is all about the work of implementation, and that invalidates any argument that hands-on managing would be micromanaging. Decisions in organizations are not choices, but also the choosing A versus B and then the actions it takes to implement them. You can't just choose. You have to follow through with plans and tasks and deliverables and resources and cost management. And folks, it is not the choice that matters. It's making that choice into an organizational decision by making it work that matters. Well, this is all work. Now, you might be thinking, well, Mark, I made the choice as an executive, but other people are doing the work. Yeah, okay. Maybe there are other people taking care of actual tasks or deliverables and so on. But you have to be involved in the planning. The idea that you're going to say, well, we're going to do A versus B, and then you're going to walk away and wave your hand vaguely as if to say, you people take care of it. That's not how these things work. Executives who are effective are not sitting on a cloud throne somewhere, letting their minions do these things. That's not how things work. I mean,
I was very sad to discover that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think a lot of people are. And I think a lot of people realize, particularly, let's say, when they become a director, when they become a manager of managers, they realize, oh my gosh, I at some level, psychologically, I knew that there was no place in the world where the universe would remain whole, where people would be given a great deal more authority without a commensurate amount of responsibility. But all we see is the authority when we look up at our executives, even our more senior managers or junior executives. We see the authority. But actually, when you get there, you feel the responsibility. Look, the distinction between choices and decisions is like the difference between ideas and behaviors. God, there's so much interest about ideas. There's people get excited about talking about them. There must be 1,000, 10,000 books about ideas and creativity on Amazon. Ideas, though, that aren't turned into behaviors aren't useful to the organization. Now, I'm not saying they're not important. They're maybe you would say they're at the headwaters of the river, right? But the headwaters of the river are pretty, right? Look, this is a spring in Minnesota, for instance. But they have very little value outside of their beauty or the idea they represent that 1,000 miles from here, the Mississippi River is a very powerful force. The river only has power when it gets big enough to turn the hydroelectric plant, right? Or it has enough flow in it, unlike the headwaters, where salmon can swim upstream and spawn. Or it's deep enough to be navigable by boats and to provide value to us. It's the behaviors of the entire organization that turn the idea into value for our society. which is what makes a choice a decision. Okay. It's the executives and managers' jobs to make the choice, that headwater, into value, to behave because of it, and to behave around it, and to report on it, and to talk about it, and to change it, and so on, and to behave downstream of it as well. If we start making choices, but we don't implement our decision-making apparatus, if we don't enable them, we end up not serving society. And if we're not serving society, we're not being a manager or an executive. If we choose A versus B, but A or B don't come into fruition, we have not created value. And in fact, because time has passed, we have destroyed value. Time is the great destroyer of all value.
Yeah, it seems to me like one of the distinctions is you're saying is that choices are maybe a judgment, right? This A is better than B, or B is better than C. And decisions involve execution, right? That's the difference.
Yes.
One's a judgment and one's is actually getting something done.
Well, think about execution and the term executive. People don't do this. Like, oh, executive is a soft, cushy chair, but individual contributors, those are executors. No.
Okay, so maybe we should talk about decision theory. At least I have a question about decision theory, because I'm sure
I
some
love
people are
decision theory.
thinking
I love
decision theory.
Yeah. I was blown away when I started doing decision theory research. I mean, research, that's lame. Okay. I'm not sitting in a carrel somewhere in the fifth mezzanine floor of the library.
Reacquainting yourself with what you already knew years ago.
No. The idea of research is, what was it? Oh, I got into a discussion with my brothers yesterday about a commercial from the 1970s, and we were all trying to find it. And if you're of a certain age, like Mike and I, you might remember this commercial. It was for clearly a powerful brand, the MGA televisions. One, and it, its claim to fame was it's crisper, it's brighter, it's a better picture. And there's a guy running a jackhammer on a street, and the reporter / interviewer walks up to him and said, "Sir, what do you do for a living?" And the jackhammer guy says, "I'm a brain surgeon." And then in the course of the thing, he says, "Well, which one do these two TVs do you pick?" He says, "Well, I picked that one." He says, "Well, even the brain surgeon prefers it." And then the jackhammer guy looks at him and says, "What's an UMGA?" He pronounces MGA, UMGA. Some of you probably remember that commercial. We were looking for it, and it just happens to be one of those things the internet hasn't hoovered up in its recapturing of the history of the world, at least electronically. And I said, one of my brothers said in the thing, he says, "Yeah, I looked for it. I wanted to send it to Dad, our father, who would remember the commercial, and couldn't find it." And I said, "Yeah, me neither. I did 5 minutes of research and couldn't find it." I mean, I think people equate Google with research. And so I did not do research on decision theory, but I've read probably 20 books about it. And I remember learning for the first time that in decision theory, and this is why it's theory, I learned that if you make a decision that doesn't turn out to have good results, decision theory could still say you made the right decision.
Exactly. Right. You made the decision based upon the data you had. And if it didn't work out right, oh, well, tough luck, bad luck. Some CEO of some large Fortune 500 company saying that would be.
Yeah, it would be like your CEO casting a spell on you of termination and you responding with a counter spell of decision theory, and it cancels out the termination spell because you would live in fantasy land if you believed that.
This is executive Dungeons and Dragons.
Exactly. You would feel very comfortable there. I'm quite sure.
I would. I'm a nerd.
Yeah.
What do you say?
And there you go. Someday we're gonna have to do a cast on the difference between geeks and nerds. I love that discussion. It's a great pop culture discussion.
Oh, which one do I want to be? Tell me now.
I wouldn't speak for you about your desires.
Oh God. I guess I'm gonna have to go do some Google research now.
Yeah, my son Drake would He's quite knowledgeable on it, and I have a feeling we have listeners right now. I'm thinking, yeah, I'm going to get some emails about that. Folks, send them. M.A. Horstman at manager-tools.com. Okay.
All right, let's go on.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So
folks.
look, you brought up decision theory. Decision theory is fascinating to me, and in some ways it's very useful, but it's also dangerous for the typical manager or executive. And actually, there are two branches of decision theory, and one of them is about what decisions are most effective based on outcomes. Okay, that's important. In decision theory, as I said, it's normal that a decision that led to disastrous conclusions would still be defended as correct or accurate. And you have to be careful about that. I mean, decision theory really, when I was reading about it, it made me realize they're not talking about organizational life. They don't understand the relationship between organizations and decisions in the societal model that we're talking about. They're talking about it in a laboratory sort of model. The world of executives and managers isn't about theory. It's about behaviors. It's about service. And it's about value. It's about the work we do, not about the thoughts we have. And look, that's the difference between being an executive and thinking about a theory. A decision that leads to poor results for the executive and or organization is a poor decision, period. Full stop. I mean, Drucker had to have been thinking about decision theory when he said that decisions are choices and the actions of implementing them, right? The moment you have to implement your choice and you have to make it into a decision, you're responsible for the outcome. And there could be 1,000 things. The problem with decision theory is you make a choice, and then if it doesn't turn out well, that's okay. The choice was still good. But no, you don't get to separate the choice from the implementation. If your implementation stinks, that may be the reason why the decision didn't turn out, because the decision encompasses the implementation as well.
Yeah, it's all about the outcome, right? That's the only thing that matters.
Dude. Yeah, seriously. Yeah, just the W in sports, just the W. In golf, you hit a couple of bad shots, then you hit one good shot, and then you get a lucky shot, and you get a par on a par 4. And that's called, the phrase might be winning ugly. It would definitely not be a regulation par, which would be 2 good shots to put you on the green and then 2 putts. Yeah, you would be winning ugly. But in decision land, executive land, and organizational land, that's all that counts. And that would go to the thing that in golf we say there are no pictures on the scorecard. Doesn't care. Doesn't matter how you got your 4. You got your 4.
And folks, just don't send me an email. You can send it to Mark, but just don't get into ethics and all that kind of stuff. We're assuming ethical behavior here.
I don't think you've ever said that on air. Don't send me email. Send it to Mark.
Well, I'm saying it now because
that's solid.
We're not we assume ethical behavior for sure. Right?
Send it to me, because last week I was in a class about mail and I learned about this technique called forwarding. So, look, the point I'm making, and I remember feeling this way as a young lieutenant and even as a less young lieutenant and maybe even as a captain, about the idea to have the power to make choices. But Drucker knew all along that it was activity and results, outcomes, that must rule the minds of those of us who think of ourselves as executives. It is outcomes. And so outcomes means choices and implementation and measurements, so on. To be effective in the world, which is part of our mission, is not to be right or correct. And I'll just say an aside, you high Cs that defend your choice as being correct, you're fighting the wrong battle. To be effective or even to be theoretically justified for what you did, that is not what being effective is. To be effective is only to produce results that benefit the organization. That's it. So the question becomes, what we have to start thinking about is, how do we turn our choices into decisions? How do we turn our ideas into value-creating behaviors? That's what it boils down to.
Hey, did you hear? Manager Tools is now holding effective remote manager sessions. If you're out there using the Manager Tools Trinity and have been recently forced to use it remotely, Or if your team's struggling, relationships are degrading, and you're noticing a decrease in your team's effectiveness, heck, even if you're out there and you have been remote this entire time and want to learn more about how to be effective in a remote management situation, visit manager-tools.com/training to register today.
Okay. And first thing we're talking about relative decisions is communications.
Yeah. And what I have learned is that a great many people who are desirous of the choice-making authority are the people who are less likely to engage in communication. The D's and C's of the world who want to be able to choose would say, I want to be right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, they're used to dotting I's, crossing T's. It's logical and makes sense.
Well, yeah, it's logical, and logic happens inside the brain.
That's right.
And effectiveness does not happen inside anybody's brain. It happens outside our brain. And in fact, effectiveness happens outside of the organization because all results of the organization are outside of the organization. And look, if there is something that you consider important in an organization that doesn't require communication, rethink its importance because the organization is connected by communication. You are nothing in the organization. It is all of us together that are something. We are the entity, not the we. So it's as simple as saying the person who makes the choice, who turns their choice into a decision, doesn't turn it into a decision alone. Right? And this is where we get into this whole idea that you have to know your people and understand your organization because it's going to take all of their work too to turn your ideas into tasks and into activities and into potential value creation opportunities for the organization. Guys, this is why organizations exist, to allow decisions to leverage the separation of labor, the collaboration, I just said collaboration, and the communication within an organization to create external value. Look, a great example of the kinds of communication required for decision implementation is pre-wiring. It's probably, I did say last week or the week before that my all-time favorite cast outside of the Trinity will always be Race Don't Chase. Because of what's happened here in the year of unnecessary governmental lockdowns, but due to COVID-19. But one of my top 10 is pre-wire. I remember when I first learned of pre-wiring, and I thought, "Wow, that's genius!" And I think of 1,000 times I should have done it. Another one, if you're asking for another one of my top 10 off the top of my head, I'd say systemic feedback. Not because you'll ever use it, but because it's great having the 82nd Airborne in your back pocket.
Well, it gives you the confidence that you can handle that situation, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have a solution to that particular problem, you're unwilling to engage in the behavior we're suggesting. So.
Yeah, exactly. So even before a choice is made, because think about it, right? I have an idea. I'm pitching my bosses and maybe some other stakeholder orgs within the larger org about my idea, but the choice hasn't been made because I'm at this point willing to deal a little bit. I'd like to keep 55%, let's say, of the core of my idea, but it's going to be changed by other people in order to get them to buy into my idea. That's the whole idea of pre-wiring. If you're relatively new to us and you've never heard pre-wiring, please go listen to that show. And if you're relatively new to us and you haven't heard Race Don't Chase, I encourage you to go listen to Race Don't Chase. And if you didn't know how important that was in 2020, we're recording this in October, I would encourage you to do that in your personal life and start with your phone, by the way, and all the subscriptions you have. But look, even before you make a choice, let alone decision, it has to be socialized. You're communicating about your choice, and the feedback you get, the commentary you get shapes the choice. The various elements in the organization, they're going to be involved in its implementation. You say, well, yeah, I mean, no, you can't do that. I remember a show, a movie starring Steve Martin. I think it's called Dreamhouse, but that may be wrong. Steve Martin and Goldie Hawn, where Steve Martin's an architect. He builds a house for his girlfriend who I think dumps him. But in the movie, he's an architect. And at some point, one of his colleagues comes up to him, and he's a well-regarded architect. A colleague comes up to him and says, "Hey, what do you think of these plans?" And Steve Martin looks at it and says, "Well, you shouldn't have this door open into a wall." Like, okay. I think of that as the other architect pre-wiring his drawing, his design. And you don't know that. I mean, you literally can't know when some other sub-org, one of your peers orgs is doing, no, we don't do that anymore. We don't use that tool. You can't say we're going to do that because we don't do that anymore. We do it differently. And if this changes, then that changes, and so on. And if you're new to this, you get frustrated. You're like, no, I want to do what I want to do. It's all so clear on the maps. It's so clear in the minds. But the men in the blocks are slow to move, and they straggle after white blackberries. So in effective organizations, decisions are communicated about before they're even made. Well, if we believe that, the idea that once a decision is made, you can't imagine a world where communication would be anything other than frequent, intense, and persuasive. You have to, right? Again, because we're all part of this organism. We're all cells in the organism. We're not glowworms, the way Winston Churchill said. Look, every decision, and everyone, if you've been a manager and executive, you know this, and it's frustrating. Every decision inherently requires communication energy to push it into and through the organization. It's not like all the cells are aligned magically just for you. Decisions require communication plans. Now, we've discussed multiple communications plans before, and we've shared an example. You can go to the website and get an example of a communication plan. Every once in a while, a couple of times a week, people are down. Actually, I think it's more than that. Mike, didn't I just throw out a quiz, a little question to the staff, and they all were wrong. And I asked how many downloads, no, how many views of show notes do we get a week? For those of you who don't know, folks, listening to the podcast is free. This is our gift to you. We hope we show you enough value that you want to become even better as a manager, as a leader, as an ethical professional, and that would include you licensing our work. You might also advocate internally in your organization for us to come train in your organization. We do that quite a bit. Lately, it's been Zoom, as you might imagine. And or to come to one of our public conferences where you can get all your questions answered and dig even deeper into the Trinity. But the most likely way for an individual to get involved is to spend $200 to become a licensee. And if you're a licensee, you'd no longer have to listen to my dulcet or anti-dulcet tones. And you can simply read the show notes, which are 98% of the show. Now, the show notes do not have the story of the MGA television commercial, but it has all the value in the show. And I asked the staff, I said, "Hey guys, that's an important part of what we do. Anybody have a guess about how many show notes are downloaded every week?" And I want to say that I have the numbers written down somewhere. I wrote them on the back of the agenda. Let me see. Let's see. Oh. Here we go. 250, 200, 300. Actually, I have the names of the people who guessed them, but I won't say that. Somebody said 327, which made me feel like we were on The Price is Right. 499. I guessed 900, and I think I was by far the closest, right?
By far, yeah.
Yeah, it's like 1,100 a week?
Yeah.
Roughly?
Yeah. Mark didn't let me guess. I felt
Oh, I'm sorry, dude. Well, no, wait. No. I specifically forbade you from guessing.
Exactly.
Because you and I both had the conversation 6 or 9 months ago. Now, to be fair, it kind of hurt my feelings because I think about a year before I had written in Things I Think that there are, in case you're wondering, we have 50,000 show notes viewed every year. And I must have gotten 50 emails from people going, I just can't believe that. And people write to me all the time and say, I didn't think I wanted to become a licensee, but now because of COVID-19, I want to support you. I want you guys to make it through this. And so they become a licensee. And then they say, I just now realized, I always thought it was overblown, but I just now realized I wanted to go back and listen to 2 or 3 casts and I didn't have an hour. So I just read the show notes. It was amazing.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, amazing.
Well,
it's like,
it's going to get better soon. I don't know if we've talked about it publicly, but we are in the process of developing something where we are getting transcripts.
Oh,
of
that's
every
right.
word
I forgot. That's
spoken
right.
on every single podcast. And then for licensees, being able to search those transcripts to find the show and where whatever you're looking for was actually said.
Yeah.
Things like MGA.
Jackhammer. I don't know if you could do MGA. It depends. I mean, it's speech to text, right? It's machine language,
Yeah.
machine speech to text. But we are within a month of having every single Manager Tools show in the database. Now, the problem is not the database. That's a fairly straightforward thing, right, Mike? Technically,
Yeah.
The issue is the interface, so that you can search and you can when you say I'm searching for Jackhammer. And you'll probably have to get pretty good at searching, and maybe the software has it as 2 words, Jack and Hammer. But a window will come up, and you'll be able to play that part of the show. Now, there might be a problem if you search for feedback, because there might be 35 million, 100 billion of those.
Maybe. Yeah.
But we get questions all the time. Mark, do you remember when I'm in a bad mood? I don't like these emails. I was actually doing emails at midnight last night because of the deluge to people responding to things I think about licensing. And I actually felt bad about it because I tell people I'm pretty rigid about when I do my email, but I simply didn't want to go into the weekend not having responded to everybody who wrote. And somebody wrote to me and said, hey, it was late. It was late last night, and I'm trying to get through 100 or so emails. And they wrote in and said, Mark, do you remember the cast? Now, mind you, there's 1,200, I think, Manager Tools casts. And I think we determined that I've written like 1.5 million words, and then said even more, obviously. And do you remember the cast where you told this story? And it was just that. I can't remember what they asked about. I should be able to remember, but I don't. And I wrote back, no.
No.
No, which was not nice. And I then got up this morning, felt guilty, and opened up a mail to them to say, look, I'm sorry. Yours was like the last email last night at midnight. You probably saw the time stamp on it. And
So folks, we'll move on. So this whole discussion inside baseball was just to get you to become a licensee so you can get the show notes and avoid it. Just joking.
No,
Just joking.
don't. No, it's not crass. We love you guys. And I feel like I'm making this longer. I'm sorry. You seem to have caught me in a voluble mood. Okay, so the communication plan is available. You'll have to create an account. The account's free. But every time people see the communication plan, they're astounded. They can't even comprehend. I want to be clear, guys. Let me make clear. I said account versus license. You don't have to become a licensee to get the communication plan. You do have to have a free account. Licensing costs $200 a year. There are free accounts on our website that get you some additional benefits. But look, I mean, when you show the plan to people, they will, they're astounded. There's multiple media, there's multiple stakeholders, there's multiple target audiences, there's multiple messages. It's a matrix. I mean, it's 3-dimensional, basically. It shows 1 dimension, but you can imagine the 3 dimensions. And Horstman's law of organizational communication: say something 7 times and half your organization will say they've heard it once.
Right.
If I've only heard about your choice 1 time, there's no way I'm going to be motivated to give you that last full measure of work devotion necessary to overcome the existing responsibilities and organizational inertia that happen everywhere to deliver the value of your new idea. I'm not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, and folks, we're not going to make this whole cast about communication plans, but if you haven't seen it, you really, it's free. I'd recommend that you go download it, because you'll see it on one sheet of paper. You'll see what we mean by communication plan, and if you've never seen one before, you'll go like, "Oh,
yeah,
that's
okay."
What they mean.
But it's even better than that. I'll make it salivatingly good, guys. If you're a manager right now, if you've been a manager less than 3 to 5 years, if you get that communication plan, the first thing that'll happen to you is you go, "Whoa, that's too much." Okay. Then you'll look a little deeper and you'll realize, no, I could do that. I could do a little bit of that. I could do a little bit more of that maybe. And you will become Superman, Superwoman, virtually overnight. Your people will say, wow, she's changed. She's got more arrows in her quiver. She's hitting the high points over and over and over again in the right way. It's easier for me to go talk to one of our stakeholders or one of our internal customers or one of our internal vendors, one of our internal service providers. I mean, she's making it easier for us. It will be a visible sign of your development as a manager. And don't let the first vision of it overwhelm you. Don't think, oh, that's too much to do. Because some of the things in the plan are only take 2 or 3 minutes. It's just a reminder that that's a stakeholder and we need to tell them something, as opposed to, oh, I told them. I sent an email. Literally, the idea that I sent an email is the same thing as I told them, is the same thing as they heard me, is the same thing as they understand me, is the same thing as they believe me, is the same thing as they're going to take action. Are you kidding me? That's like saying, as I'm getting dressed, the socks are somewhere in my bedroom, so therefore I have them on. No, it doesn't work that way. If you thought executive or managerial role power eliminated the requirement for you to be a salesperson, you're wrong. And this is where a lot of high Cs, sorry folks, struggle as executives. They don't like persuasion. I'll never forget the first time my boss told me that, Mark, there's a good portion of the world that thinks you're too smooth. They don't like your ideas because they just know you're tricking them. I said, I'm not tricking them. I'm not. And my DISC profile says I manipulate people. I've never manipulated a person in my life. You'd have to have a black spot on your heart to do that. No, I haven't done that. But my boss told me, and he was totally right, some people prefer nothing but logic in their decisions. Okay, and that's fine for those people who prefer nothing but logic. But I'll tell you, you're going to struggle as an executive if you produce something perfectly logical and you discover that half the world doesn't give a hoot about how logical it is. They want to know what's in it for them. And you may not like that, but tough. That's the way the world is. And if you're not willing to embrace that the world's a diverse place with people with different beliefs and activities and methods and so on, you're smoking crack. Okay, is that enough of a rant, Mike?
I think your feelings are well known at this point.
Yeah.
But
sorry,
but I agree. So
yeah, there you go.
I've learned it the hard way many times, unfortunately.
Yeah, he says I agree. I just took 5,000 words making a case. These casts would be much shorter. They'd be much easier to search for the transcript if Mike wrote them and did them, because Mike would say,
yeah, I'd say
communicate
is good.
Okay. Communicate.
Next.
Communicate. Hey dudes, communicate. Right?
Right. Yeah. So you might think that maybe communication is not one of my greatest strengths.
Well, no, dude. Yeah. No, don't say that. Okay. Executive life is a great deal about persuasion. And here will blow away half the audience. All communication is persuasion. You just have to embrace that. Go read about communication theory. It'll be in the first chapter of every book. All communication is persuasion. Look, who needs to know? What parts of the org do you need to carry your decision to? And by the way, don't say, who do you need to know? Ask, from their perspective, would they need to know? And suddenly it's a lot more than what you said. Decisions die all the time between the choice being made and the value being created. And so our communication plan, our persuasion plan, that's what it is. Our marketing plan, it's internal marketing plan, for heaven's sakes, needs to consider who are all of the internal stakeholders. I've never liked stakeholders, but internally, it's a fairly good nom de plume, if you will, for the people affected by our change, our decision, our choice, our implementation. And then you have to ask, what do they need to know? Right? Each of them has its own needs. What will persuade each one of them? Is it relationships for these folks? Is it results for these other folks? Is it efficiencies for this group? Is it process for this group? Right? Is it career effects? Is it costs? There are some people who all they care about is cost. There are other people all they care about is margins. Is it customer metrics? The message of your idea is not just the idea. It is the impact of the idea on these internal organizations. The message is not the same in every venue. It's not the same in every group. A roadshow isn't the same message everywhere. Now, you might want to make it the same, but all you're doing is slicing off value with each group you present to. Now, is there a core that's the same? Sure. Okay. Another thing, when do these people need to know? How often do you have to communicate to each group, which you'll see in the communication plan? How is the initial rollout when you broach the idea, maybe even in a pre-wire, different from updates you're going to have to give? When do you stop updating? When the organization behaves as if it's always been doing that thing. Right? And so therefore, when it's new and people still think it's new, you're probably still communicating about it. And for the record, guys, email is not communication. It's selfish lethargy, dooming your choice to death, basically. Actually, no, it doesn't doom your choice. It dooms your choice into a decision death. Because the choice still exists. It just didn't become a decision, which is value creating implementation. Now, if you're the executive that made the choice and you're therefore creating the decision, obviously, dudes, you can't do this alone. You're going to have to delegate, right? In most cases, you are. The messages you're going to have people carry, the media they're going to carry it through, the audiences they're going to reach. You're going to have to delegate this. There has to be a team of people communicating about it. Ask them to create their own decks. Ask them to create messages around the idea. Now, you'll have to educate them, but it's not your job as an executive to create all the decks. Yes, you'll be doing some of the water carrying, but so will they. And look, all we're doing here is talking about one part of it, the communication part. Every area below, responsibilities, deadlines, reporting, measuring, they all require their own communication. Oh, yeah. I think suddenly some people are going, I don't want to be an executive. Okay? Like, no, that's hard work. What do you think, that they double your pay so that you have less work? It's like that quote, Lord, baseball is a worrying thing, right? That's what executives do. They sit around and worry.
There you go. Okay, so this, I think, is a good place to stop.
I did not realize we had gone that long. I feel a little embarrassed.
That's okay.
But not enough to change it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we get all sorts of feedback. People love it. People hate it.
Yeah.
Whatever. But that's
it's free. If you don't like it, turn it off and go find somebody else who gives you this much actionable, specific advice every week for free.
Yeah, and sometimes stories about MGA. Where else can you get that, folks?
Yeah,
where else can you get that kind of stuff?
Nobody, nowhere.
All right. Look, dude, I enjoyed it immensely.
I had fun. And, part of the reason we have fun is we know there are hundreds of thousands of listeners out there, and we love you folks.
Yeah, we do. And guys, we got to have fun. Otherwise, it's going to be hard. It's hard to do every week if you don't enjoy what you're doing. Do what you love, folks. Provide value and hopefully have fun while you're doing it. So there you go. Thanks, everyone. That's it. we'll continue this topic next week. In the meantime, have a great one. So long.